welcome, Bot Army. Good to see you. Glad to be here tonight. I am maybe 30 Bats. I'm your stream host, and we're going to talk about some D&D tonight. Talk about RPGs, running the game, anything you want to talk about with that stuff. We're gonna do it. Really quickly, I just want to make sure that everybody's aware I am eating ice cream. This isn't just, you know, a mound of some sort of drug. Suppose it is, but at any rate, we're gonna get some stuff happening. You know, we're gonna talk about some stuff with D&D tonight, where I think we might get some useful conversation happening. So, one of the things I want to talk about tonight is adventure design. So, yeah, adventure design. It's going to be a thing that that a lot of people have trouble figuring out at first, and for good reason. Adventure design is hard for some folks, for a lot of folks. And sorry if I'm speaking haltingly right now. I'm trying to shill myself out on a Discord server. So I will be right back. But tonight we're going to talk about some adventure design principles. Looking forward to it, and I'll see you then. Just a moment. All right, and we're back. Thank you for being so patient. As though there were anyone here. Thank you for being so patient, random person who's watching the VOD later. Oh, look, it's my friend. Your friend is eating ice cream in a thunderstorm, and it's a beautiful thing. But we're talking about adventure design tonight, which is something that that you're going to be interested in, Ashley, because you just got done writing your first one-shot. That's super cool. Thank you. Thank you for the support. Yeah, so what do we do when we're writing an adventure? What are we trying to do, and what tools do we have available to us? Good for you. Pre-gens are a good thing for one-shots. A lot of people, when they're talking about an adventure, what do they mean? Typically, they're talking about some sort of story being told with a definitive goal and some end in mind. Some characters are going to have to be involved. They're going to overcome some obstacles. They're going to learn some things. They're going to hit conflict. Hopefully they'll be rewarded, or maybe they'll fail. Well, how do we do that in D&D? How do we do that in tabletop role-playing games? That's a big question. And so what we're going to talk about tonight, I think, is we're going to start off anyway by talking about adventure structure. We're going to talk about building toward something in a narrative arc. We're going to talk about conflict and the shapes that it can take. I think that's a pretty good place to start. If other things come up while we're talking about it, other things come up while we're talking about it. So, the big thing about adventures is you got to have an adventure to go on. You got to have a reason to go do something. This is what we refer to typically as plot hooks, or adventure hooks, or story hooks. Why do we call them hooks? Well, it's because it's something that you should run into and it should grab you. It should arrest your forward motion and say, hey, come over here. They pull you in. Exactly. So how do we make those things? Do you just throw something out in front of your players and hope something happens? Probably not a great idea. Remember, you're dealing with a group of people who, by the very fact that they're sitting around a table with dice and character sheets, want to do something. Okay? And anytime you give them a scene to act in, they're going to do something. Especially if you ask them, what do you do? Yeah, that's a classic thing to do. Describe something and then go, all right, what do you do? What happens? Because they'll take the established facts and they'll run with them. So just as an exercise, I recently wrote a one-shot adventure to fill in for our regular DM on Biggie Small's Adventuring Company. So, yeah, it was a friggin' party. Because I gave people something to do. What did I give them to do? I gave them a mystery that needed solving. Right? And that necessarily pulled them into the plot I had pre-prepared. Hooks don't just stand out there on their own being pointy and shiny. They're tied to a line. They pull you somewhere. So you've got to know where your hooks are going. So for the Biggie Smalls one shot, House on the Hill, which you should be able to watch the VOD still, it should be up. What was the main hook? And where did it lead? Well, as with anything for DMing, you typically start from the back and go to the thing that's in front of your players first. This ice cream is like short-circuiting my brain. So sorry if some of this stuff doesn't make sense. What I mean by that is you come up with the situation that they're going to find. And then you determine how they get pulled into it. You have something that already exists that they're going to get involved with and change. Now, there are any number of ways that you can write that sort of thing, right? Big classic one. Okay, let's take a Western. Standard Western formula. Our drifter comes into town. First thing, spade. Quit talking to yourself over there. So, standard Western formula. Our hero comes into town, or maybe he's our anti-hero, who knows? First thing he does, sees things that's going on. You know, you see people traveling through the town, all of this stuff. Hey, all my friends are showing up here. And, you know, you sort of establish, oh, this is a Western town. What's happening in this Western town? Well, not a whole bunch unless you want to go drink at the bar. That's the primary location for this encounter, is the bar, the saloon. So you start dropping those hints. There's nothing going on here unless you're in the saloon business. So our hero goes to the saloon. Our main character goes to the saloon. Pushes in those swinging doors, and what's happening? The music stops on the piano. Oh, who else is in here? There's a big fella in a raccoon hat, and he wants to fist fight. Will you oblige him? See, that's a hook. Because maybe that man in the raccoon skin hat, he's in the raccoon hat gang. They don't take kindly to being beaten in public. Maybe this encounter is easy on purpose, so that he gets pulled into a greater thing. This is what we refer to as our plot hook. It draws you deeper into circumstances you would not otherwise have seen. So, how do we do this with adventures? There are a number of ways you can do this. If you if you look in the Dungeon Master's Guide, for example, you'll find out that there are a couple of different kinds of adventures. They put them in basically two categories. It's encounter-based or location-based is kind of the two ways that they think about it in that book. Encounter-based stuff is sort of like things that just happen and you have to react to them. Location-based stuff is sort of more your classic dungeon crawly sort of thing, to put it really simply. So you've got to know what's going on in your location. You've got to know what's happening in your situation, in your encounter. All of this is just sort of talking around the fact that you've got to sit down and write. You got to come up with an interesting situation, wherever it's located, whenever it's happening, however many people are involved, whatever their motivations are. You've got to come up with an interesting situation that your party can influence and change. So, I want to hear what you've got. What, in 3 sentences, is a situation that your party could enter into and change? We'll give you a minute. Okay, players are currently being sent to retrieve some totally legal research. I like it. Anybody else got any ideas? Party is stopping sacrifices. That's a classic. Anybody else? Who we got in here? Okay. Zhao, you don't have to put anything in there. I know you're doing things. So let's play with those. Matter of fact, let's combine them. So we've got these things, right? Who does the research belong to, and why does it center around the sacrifice of sentient beings? There's a juicy idea. Well, there are a number of methods that we can use to play with these ideas. One of my favorites right now is a form of Japanese essay writing called Kisho Tenketsu. And for anybody who speaks Japanese who is listening to this later or watching this later, I'm sorry for my pronunciation of those things. I'm just a white guy from the Southeast in the U.S. Kisho Tenketsu is a sort of an essay outline that's taught to Japanese school kids. And here's how it works. Key. Your initial piece of information, right? This is what the party sees at first. So let's say there's this library, and you've been told that there's information in there that you need. Okay, that's all you need for key. Show. Continued information. Well, okay. This library specializes in patents that are being that are awaiting approval, or it specializes in a particular branch of research. Okay, cool, good to know. And that's the library there? Good, awesome. Key, show. 10 is the twist. Within this library, there is a series of scribes who gain new knowledge by sacrificing the innocent to an elder being, or to an evil god, or whatever. Maybe if we're going to be D&D specific about it, the scribes keep a small colony of Kuotoa in the basement of the library. Kuotoa, by the lore, can imagine new gods into existence, and they've imagined a new god of information who spouts things that man was not meant to know. That's a pretty good 10, which is your twist, or seemingly unrelated information, or for our purposes, basically it's a twist. So key, there's this library. It's full of all sorts of really interesting research. Show, it specializes in research about the origin of the races of the world, about ideologies. 10, all this information is being acquired through sacrifices to a god of forbidden knowledge which has been conjured by a tribe of Kuo-toa in the basement. Ketsu. Either save the forbidden knowledge, or destroy the cult that's producing it. Hook. How do you get people involved in that? Their friend walked into the library. Some NPC that matters to them. They said they'd be right back. They've disappeared. You receive a message from them. They cast the message spell. Maybe they've got it as a cantrip or something. Or a first level spell. I can't remember what message is. Help. That's all they were able to get out. That's a hook. Because suddenly this library matters to them. They'll be able to find out about the kinds of research that are in it. They'll be able to find out that in the basement there's this cult on top of a cult, and they're sacrificing sentient beings. So resolve it, right? That's a really great narrative structure. It's one of the fastest things we can do. We wrote that, yeah, cultception, like make it like it makes itself interesting. We came up with that in like what, 3 minutes, 5 minutes? How can we finish that out and make it into a real adventure? How do we make it into a real adventure instead of just like, well, we've got this series of events that is lying out there in the world, and we've come up with a pretty easy way to get the people involved, but like, what do we do with that? How do we proceed from there and make it into a session of Dungeons and Dragons? Well, this is where something else comes in. One of my favorite structures for quickly writing a series of encounters. We've come up with a series of plot points. Now we need to come up with a series of encounters that fits that plot. Well, anyone who's talked to me for terribly long about dungeon design and things like that knows that I'm a big fan of, at least in theory, the 5-room dungeon structure. Now, you might think from the name it uses 5 rooms and 5 rooms only. Well, this is actually a really modular system. You can mix and match rooms as much as you want to. And not just a master DM. No, I've stolen things from a lot of really smart people, and I've practiced using those things. The 5-room dungeon structure is really a modular system of 5 parts, and you can switch those things around as much as you want to. You are all entirely too sweet. So what is the 5-room dungeon structure? First, in the classic thing, first, you have a guardian. Now, this is any obstacle that can get in the way of going further. So in the case of our library, well, maybe there's not a guard standing at the door. Maybe there's not like a monster outside the stacks. Maybe you've just got to deal with a particularly unhelpful circulation librarian. You know, the little old, I don't know, pick your player character race. Little old Triton woman who sits behind the desk. You know, and you can figure out what that NPC looks like. We'll talk NPCs another time. And maybe she's just really unhelpful. Maybe she is the one who is one of the members of this meta cult this cult over the Kuotoa cult. And she doesn't want you in there. Well, okay, you've got an encounter. She doesn't want you in there. She's going to do everything in her power to stop that. Does this mean it's a fight? Not necessarily. It could be. She's some spellcaster, or really surprise the party. She's a barbarian or a fighter of some kind, a paladin of this new cult. I don't know. Do what you want. It's your dungeon. It's your adventure. Whatever it is, she's trying to keep people from going downstairs. And so, yeah, 9 out of 10, the party will try to murderize, but make her just, like, annoying. But then give her things that are endearing. Make her first thing. Make her first thing, you know, like being really helpful, because her cover is that she's a librarian. She really is a librarian. She just also happens to be involved in this cult, right? But anyway, that's getting into NPC stuff. But anyway, so she presents an obstacle to the party that they have to overcome. And so, by the way, my shirt says "Make America Read Again," just for anybody who's watching this and thinks that I'm a particular way. So, room 1, encounter 1, 5-room dungeon, room 1, guardian. This librarian at the circulation desk does not want people to go anywhere else in the library other than her carefully curated space, which doesn't reveal the cults. Cool. So let's say they figure out a way to get past her, whatever that looks like for you, or they talk their way past, fight their way past, sneak their way past, trick her, whatever. Okay, cool. We're getting some structure, because our second room is a puzzle or a role play thing. Well, okay, this is a secretive cult, so maybe you've got to find the way that they get in. Maybe they have to bring a particular stack of books to a particular little alcove in the library, and that will that combination of texts will spell something out, or turn into a sentence that answers a riddle that is, you know, somehow presented in that little alcove. So first, you got to find the alcove. Second, you got to recognize there's a riddle there. Third, you got to find the right. You got to solve the fact that you need books for that. Fourth, you got to find the right books. Fifth, you got to bring it back and arrange them in the proper order. Sure, there's a puzzle right there. Write whatever variables you want in it. There's your structure, and we'll say that a hidden door clicks open quietly. It's a library. There's your second room, a puzzle or a role-play encounter. Could be that you just talk someone into it. But I think the puzzle's more fun in this instance. And that's what DMing is about, is creating chances for fun. So there you go. So room 3. Room 3 is a red herring or a setback. So here, it would make sense for there to be a setback, because you've already found something secret in an obviously public place, right? Red herrings and setbacks are hard, and I'm glad that you were able to find that out. It's tough to set it up in a way that is convincing, because it has to be like related sidelong. It has to be like almost right for a red herring to work. You got to really finesse those. And we'll talk about red herring from Monday's game, from the one shot, really quickly. The way that you tie the red herring into the plot is by thinking about, with this structure anyway, is by thinking about the Kisho Tenketsu in combination with the 5-room dungeon structure. So the piece that makes this, that kid made me so mad. Thank you very much. That is a huge compliment. So when you're thinking about these two structures, the Kisho Tenketsu and the 5-room dungeon, the thing that links these two things together really solidly is a really strong sense of what your ten is and what your red herring is. Okay? You want to make sure those things link well, because that's what's going to make it work. It's what's going to make it twist. It's what's going to make it a good red herring. So what I did, we'll step away from our example dungeon for a second. What I did on Monday was there was a basically there was a child in a village who was experimenting with eldritch magics, and they got way away from him and he became possessed, right? This kid, I introduced him as he never hurt anybody from a secondhand source. He never hurt anybody. He is playfully mischievous. He was stealing fruit from a fruit stand and knew he was going to get caught, you know? And he's friends with the people involved. Okay, he's friends with a little girl who's gone missing. Fantastic. He runs toward the house. And then I proceeded to build an atmosphere of horror in the house and put him behind a locked door that required faces to open. It was a creepy puzzle, whatever. He was the big bad. But I did everything I could to make that kid precocious and sweet and loving toward the party. I did everything I could to make them want to protect this kid. And then he turns on them and is this eldritch horror. It was a really, really great twist. What was the red herring? The red herring was him acting scared. It was him acting vulnerable. It was him getting in close physical proximity to the party while he was doing that. It was him asking a bunch of really cute questions because he was about to do something horrible. So for this twist, we've got our Kisho Tenketsu. There's this library that specializes in research about etiology, and it's been putting out some really, really great stuff lately. Nobody knows where this stuff is coming from. Nobody knows where the research is coming from. That's our Kisho. 10 is there is a cult of Koto who have imagined a new god of knowledge and information, of forbidden knowledge. And there is a meta cult of researchers who are procuring sentient beings to sacrifice to this new god in order to slake their thirst for forbidden knowledge. Ketsu, do something about it, whatever it is. Ketsu can be more defined than that, but I like to give some choice here because I'm lazy. Lazy will help me because it provides more opportunities for player choice. So we've got our Kisho Tenketsu. 5-room dungeon. Room 1, Guardian. Lady at the circulation desk. Room 2, puzzle or role play. Book puzzle to open a secret entrance. Room 3 is going to be our red herring or setback. It can be either one. I think a setback might work better here, but let's see what we can do. The Tetsu is that there's a secret cult. Sorry, the 10 is there's a secret cult. So our twist, our twist is there's a secret cult, and there needs to be something to do with that in our setback or red herring. Now, if you're gonna do a red herring in a setting like this, maybe you have 3 paths you could go down, and 2 of them end in horrifying traps. You could do that, but why would a secret society that you already have to have specialized knowledge to even access, why would they have like false hallways and traps? It doesn't make any sense. That makes way more sense for something like an ancient dungeon. An ancient dungeon where people are trying to protect treasure. Treasure needs protecting, and so traps, you know, when you think traps, think where would home security measures make sense, right? Where would security measures make sense? Well, their primary security measure here is that puzzle that nobody even knows is there unless they're kind of in the know. Well, all right then. So a red herring doesn't really work here. A trap doesn't really work here. A setback works here. So what's our setback? Setbacks can be anything that that acts as an obstacle. Maybe we make our setback another puzzle or something like that. Or maybe we make our setback a roleplay encounter. You see what I'm saying here? We don't need to have exactly the same rooms in exactly the same places all the time. What kind of setback would you put here? I'm curious. Matter of fact, I'm gonna go wash this cup out so that I don't end up with just sticky ice cream cup, and I'll see what you got when I get back. Okay, so I was back faster than I thought I'd be. Shoot me. Okay, you can always have someone push a shelf onto the party or try to draw them away from the actual research by causing some sort of distraction, perhaps a false wall. Those are interesting ideas. Those all make sense before the puzzle. But this isn't written in stone. Nobody's published this, right? We can move this around. We can have it be Guardian setback puzzle. Whatever we got to do to make it work. That's the thing about adventure design, is you got to do whatever you got to do to make it work, to make it make sense. How about this? You've given me an idea with the push a shelf, false wall thing. The false wall thing gives me an idea. What if, when we walk into this secret passage, there are 3 glowing mystical portals, like dimension doors? So anything that's like misleading makes more sense before you get into the area. So we're trying to get into the area and have something interesting to happen here. So I like those thoughts. Those are really cool ideas, but they make sense in other parts of the adventure that we're already past. So right now, we've gotten past the librarian at the circulation desk. We found the book puzzle, solved the book puzzle. We get in there, and it's just a small room. No more than 30 feet by 20 feet, which is actually a fairly good-sized room, but, you know. Featureless, except for 3 large glowing portals. 1 green, 1 blue, 1 red. Where do the portals go? Well, 2 of them will go to storage areas. Or 2 of them will go to, maybe one of them goes to a holding pen for sacrifices. You don't want their screams to be heard in the building. This is a shack somewhere out in the middle of nowhere. It's just a portal to there. There's an idea. Maybe the other one goes to the ritualist's quarters, where the ritual texts are prepared, or the tomes of knowledge that are given by the deity are given. Perfectly fine. The other one goes to room 4. Room 4 is your major conflict for the adventure. You can have combat in other places in this and stuff like that, conflict in other places. We've already had that with the Guardian. Room 4 is where your big conflict happens, and typically that's combat, most dungeons, most adventures. So who are they fighting? Well, we can look back at our Kisho Tenketsu and realize, oh, from our 10, well, they're going to be fighting the Meta Cult and the Kuotoa Cult. And possibly that god of knowledge, depending on how you want to do it. Here's where you can really stretch your legs on combat. Maybe this ritual takes place in the deep, dark swamps. Maybe this takes place in a realm of blinding light. I mean, just get creative with it, right? Because we've already got portals to nowhere. The combat money was so much fun, but dang, did it hurt. Thank you for that. I designed it to basically destroy the party, and I did not run it straight. If I had run it straight, everybody would have died. But I didn't want to do that to you. I wanted it to be risky. Anyway, so... So, room 4 is our major conflict, whatever that fight looks like, and we can design that later. What's room 5 in the 5-room dungeon? 5-room dungeons have a 5th room at the end, which is your reward or twist. So with the Kisho Tenketsu structure already establishing a twist, sort of mid-plot, we don't really need to put a twist here. We can if we want to extend it. But let's say that instead our reward is that we save our friend. You can have a secret treasure room, save our friend, and maybe they did like this is dark, but you've got to pull dark things from you got to pull good ideas from dark places sometimes for DMing, because you're dealing with bad guys, evil people, and monsters. So maybe they were doing the concentration camp thing and collecting all of their jewelry and money and shoes and clothes and whatever, and putting those in a special place back here to act as a fund for the group. Which makes sense, you know, if a shadowy group is trying to lure people somewhere, well, how do they do it? Promise them riches. Prove that you've got money. You know? That's a perfectly nefarious thing to try. But that is that's up to you. What do your rewards look like? You know, find the forbidden knowledge text and need to decide to keep or destroy it. Yeah, that's a perfect thing. You know, maybe all of those texts are there and they've got a moral quandary to deal with. Who knows? Maybe the actual God of knowledge shows up to talk to them at that point and says, look, people are not meant to know this. If you do this, it will destroy the fabric of society. I'll make a deal with you. If you destroy these texts, I'll grant you one favor. Each of you. One favor. You can call it in anytime. I will move heaven and earth in a literal fashion to get you that. And so you give them each a ring of wish. You know, one charge destroys itself upon use. That's a cool thing to put in front of your players. Especially if they're higher tier, you know, and regular rewards are kind of losing their luster. But look at that. We just designed an entire dungeon, an entire adventure. The broad strokes anyway, we can do statistics and balancing and whatever in our free time, especially if you've got good tools for it. I really like the D&D Beyond Encounter Builder. Super useful. But whatever happens here, you've got the bones and a lot of the meat of a good adventure, a solid adventure. And so this is the structure that works for me a lot of times. And I'll switch rooms around, I'll add rooms on in different places for the 5-room dungeon structure. I just take those 5 pieces and basically play Legos until I've got something I like. And then you've got all of that stuff. Well, how do you hook people in? Well, maybe their friend goes missing. Maybe they are studying in this library and they see people disappearing behind a certain set of stacks. You know, maybe maybe they go to reach for one of the books that solves the puzzle at the same time as someone else, and they're really, really just an ass about getting that book. And so they follow them and they see them disappear into a secret door. You know, it's just like anything that's like interesting, do it. Anything that seems like it might grab your player's attention and lead them somewhere, do it. Maybe they're studying up on some history thing. Someone drops a little card in their side pocket of their cloak, you know, in the inside pocket of their cloak. You know, and it's an invitation to a meeting. An interesting voice will make them intrigued. Yeah. Ooh, maybe they're in the library and they hear that interesting voice from the other side of the stacks talking about something weird. You know, you've got to know what you'll find out what your players, go for. It doesn't. It's not that hard to figure out what people like go after when they're doing this stuff. So that's just a quick primer on some adventure design stuff that I've gotten to do. I'm an extremely lazy dungeon master, and so I'm going to just use whatever resources are available to me to not have to work so hard. Kisho Tenketsu in the 5-room dungeon really helped me to do that stuff well, and really helped me to do that stuff consistently. Now, what do you do with your other time, right? You've got your structure, you've got your ideas. What do you do with the other time? Let's say that you even built your encounters. Well, how do you make the rest of the thing work? I've been doing this a while, and the most success I've had with this stuff is giving vague descriptions. For one thing, it's less work for me. Lazy DM, right? But for another, the things you don't describe either go ignored or they go assumed, right? So the good thing about player assumption in D&D is, well, any RPG really, you can do this at any table. The good thing about player assumption in these games is they'll either ask questions about the things they're not sure about, or they will assume stuff and just say it out loud. And you get to work with them. It's a collaborative thing. You don't just have this picture in your head of what's going on and then just like insist that it's exactly that way. This is a game of yes and. Yes and is the improvisational acting and typically comedy because, people like to laugh. But yes and is the rule that says when someone says something, you say yes and also this. So when we were going into this house for the one-shot House on the Hill horror one-shot, Ashley asked a really interesting question from the point of view of her character, Levira. Levira wondered aloud, is this place bigger on the inside? I had not planned for it to be bigger on the inside. I just said, yeah, make an intelligence check to see. Whatever they rolled. It was, as long as it was like over a 10. Yeah, it's bigger on the inside now because you said that in a way that made me think it would freak you out. Roll with it, guys. Roll with it. Because you need to be able to play on the things that they're assuming. So I continued to extrapolate on that. Jamie, she asked from the point of view of her character Belris, who was an Aarakocra. How high is the ceiling in here? Can I fly in here? Oh, okay. So the ceiling started stretching into a dome above them. And one of the monsters in there, which is a star spawn, truly terrifying little critter, used that swelling ceiling to launch itself at the players. And I demonstrated to them, oh, it does falling damage from that height. So it really is 30 feet up. He took 3d6 falling damage. Things like that. It's easy to do that, and you look like a genius when really you're just agreeing with them. It's one of the great structures, one of the great rules for meetings in real life. If you're ever in a meeting, try this. Let everyone else talk. Let them say all the stupid little things they're going to say. Listen to them. And when you have an idea that hasn't been brought up, hold on to it till everybody's had their say. Then say the thing that nobody said. So many meetings are like, well, let me piggyback off of that. Or, to continue that thought. Or, that makes me think. Instead of that, at the end, just say, those are all really good points. I was thinking this. You'll look like a genius. And you'll look like you care about the people in the room, which you should. Especially with tabletop role-playing games. Care about the people around your table. Because they're there to have fun with you, their friend. Right? You're there to have fun with them, your friends. So, let them talk. Let them say stuff when they're in this adventure of yours. So let's say we walk into this library. Stacks upon stacks just fading into the background. As you can see, it's perhaps 100 yards back to the circulation desk. A long, wide carpet separates the areas in which you can walk. Some places have a couple of the stacks have a velvet rope on stanchions. That's the word. A velvet rope hung on stanchions blocks off a place. A sign says restricted section. A lone Triton woman with graying hair and wide black eyes sits behind the circulation desk. What did I not tell you? I didn't tell you anything about what books were where. I didn't tell you anything about where the bathroom is. I didn't tell you that the floor is made of marble, that it's tiled, that there's a pattern on the floor. I didn't tell you that there was a vaulted ceiling. I didn't tell you that there are Doric columns. All of these things are things you can use. So, I look around at the columns. What do I see? Well, you see that all of them... Make a perception check now that you're looking around. Okay. You pass the perception. Okay, good job. You see that all of them are Doric columns. Except that one. And you can put whatever you want over there. Use the things that people are assuming and get ideas from them. They assumed that the columns were interesting. Let the columns be interesting. They assumed that the pattern on the floor could be meaningful. Let it be. They assume that the restricted section is hiding something important. Put something important there. This is sort of an extrapolation on an idea that a lot of GMs frown upon, and I think maybe unfairly so. It's an idea called the quantum ogre. And the quantum ogre is an ogre that is simultaneously behind a door and not behind a door. It all depends on what you want behind the door. So wherever your players go, let's say you've got 3 rooms. One is an entryway. One has got an ogre in it. One has got treasure in it. Well, you lay those out in a line, Monty Hall style, right? Where you've got door number 1, door number 2, door number 3. Schrodinger's ogre. Yeah, basically. But you've got door number 1, door number 2, door number 3. Which door do you pick? Pick a door. Go on ahead. Pick a door. 2. There's an ogre behind that door. Let's reset. Pick a door. Go on ahead. Pick another door. There's an ogre behind door 3. If I told you to pick again, if you picked door number 1, there's an ogre behind door number 1 if we reset this. Because whatever door you pick, there's going to be an ogre there. Some people will argue that this is unfairly taking away the agency of the players. Yeah, kind of. That's a fair criticism, but Is it fun for them to not encounter the ogre before they get to the treasure? Is it fun for them to get the treasure, see all the artwork on the walls, and skip the ogre? I'd say no. Because I'm not here to provide ultimate freedom. I'm not. I'm here to provide ultimate chances for fun. That's an important difference. Right, they could choose not to open any doors, but where's the fun in that? If there's no fun involved in the in the choice, why would you make the choice? Now, this is where suspension of disbelief comes in pretty heavy. When you're allowing people's assumptions to guide them to cool stuff you already had in other places, and you just say, it's over there now, that feels like they found something cool. It doesn't feel like you put something cool in front of them. They're playing a game. Games are all about the illusion of choice and suspension of disbelief. Absolutely, Spade. That's exactly what's going on here. So let people assume things. Let them add color. And maybe you just pick what they're coloring in. You know, like there's nothing wrong with that. Coloring books are still fun, even though they already chose the pictures. So that's one big thing about fleshing out your adventure. Another big thing about fleshing out your adventure is it's NPCs. You built a company into your world from a conversation your players had in character. That is so cool. That's exactly the kind of stuff that should be happening. D&D role-playing games should be a give and take from the person running the game and the people playing characters in the game. They loved that they were right about it because they were right about it. You made them right. And that's okay. It's all right to make people right. But so what have we talked about tonight? We've talked about some basic adventure principles, you know, like what an adventure is. We've talked about a method of building adventures. There's like a million out there. Whatever works for you, do it. And we've talked a little bit about flavoring our dungeons with the ability to make our players right. Right. See my players enjoy themselves, but also challenging them morally. Yeah, putting those tough choices in front of them is really fun. So we've talked a little bit about flavoring our dungeon with the ability to make our characters, our player characters, right about the dungeon. Quantum Ogre, whatever it is. You know, for this dungeon that we've sort of created here that we're using as sort of a testing ground for this. Okay, let's say that they get interested in the columns. Great. Maybe that's where the alcove is. I'm glad. Maybe that's where the alcove is. You know, maybe that's how they find the puzzle. Nothing wrong with that. The restricted section. Maybe the restricted section is where all of those books come from. Or maybe it's where one of those books comes from. Make that interesting. You know, you can say, well, you know, on this thing there's a mural of an elf, a human, a dwarf. Welcome back. There's an elf, a human, a dwarf, an orc, and a fish. So I've already got the solution to this thing in mind. You've got to collect certain books that talk about the etiological origins. Yeah, attach the story when the party bites. Put the fish around the fish hook. Or put the fish hook in the fish. You know, so we've got these things, and maybe the answer is you've got to get these etiological texts about each of these races and align them on the little shelves under each of these little mosaics. Sure. One of these, the one about the fish people, the Tritons, is in the restricted section. How are you going to get there? Maybe it's magically protected by wards. Whatever happens. Maybe there's a shock rune, a lightning rune, at either end of the restricted section. You got to figure out how to get there. I don't know. That's a fun extended version of that puzzle. And so yeah, an alarm spell that could work too. That could work great. And so you say, well, you see a thin silver thread about, I don't know, half a foot above the floor, just strung across, thin as silk. That's easy. How do you break that plane without setting off the alarm spell? What happens if they break it? Maybe there are a couple of library guards who come up, and big muscly fellows who love to read. Whatever. You take these things and you expand on them, and you put the hook in the fish's mouth. It makes people feel good because people like being right. It makes people feel good because they're advancing the plot. It makes people feel good because you're rewarding them for interesting things, for being in character and doing stuff. That's kind of what adventuring is about, kind of. It's about setting up a structure in which your players can do cool stuff and feel interesting, feel cool. It's just our job to hang all that crap out there and say, go for it. Describe things. Yeah, that's pretty much all I've got on this stuff right now. We've done a solid hour on adventure design stuff for this, very bare bones kind of thing. We created a dungeon in a library in a city. Cool. Now though, I would love to know what's on your minds. What do you want to talk about? What do you want to ask about? What's going on in your campaigns that maybe you want a little extra insight, a little extra discussion on, because I'm more than willing to sit jabber about this crap. So all right, question. A weird multi-class that I think is cool. Oh man. The thing is, like, almost none of them are that weird. Barbarian is actually one of my favorite things, because just because you're an angry boy does not mean that you are not a singing boy. I mean, you could argue that most, I think, okay, multi-classing bard with anything is a little bit easy, I think. I think it's more interesting to do things like that have sort of like opposite stat proficiencies. I think it's interesting to see things like the barbarian wizard or the paladin warlock, or actually paladin warlock matches up really well, or the fighter sorcerer. Fighter monk actually is kind of an interesting multi-class. Yeah, barbarian rogue, druid rogue, I think is kind of a fun one. I think that rogue paladin is kind of a fun one, just because you've got sort of the moral mixture there. I think that I think they're all cool. Like, let's just cut the shit on that. I think they're all cool. But yeah, like, just try stuff. Smash rocks together, see what comes out. Barbarian halfling, low intelligence, uses nursery rhymes as inspiration. I really like that. Yeah, rogue paladins, legitimately terrifying DPS. You can make any build work in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. They intentionally put it such that you're not min-maxing too much, even if you multi-class. I'm a big fan of Ranger Rogues. A Paladin, a Barbarian, and a Sorcerer right now. I'm a big fan of Ranger Rogues. You give a Ranger sneak attack, and they are unstoppable. Because they're already basically machine guns, you know? Fighter, Ranger, multi-class, yeah. Battlemaster Fighter. With a few levels in Ranger. That's pretty cool. Where you get into real fun is the subclasses, and mixing those. So I don't know. I like those. I like those things. So that's not a real answer, but I just threw out a bunch of really cool stuff. So. Big part of DMing is just saying things until somebody latches onto it. And that's just kind of what it is, you know? Ooh. Man. Yeah, anything else? Any other questions? I know that I started this off like really, really fractured. And I just can't. I couldn't think. Subclass wise, Mastermind Rogue, College of Whispers Bard, Juicy. Oh, yes, it is. It really, really is. I really like that. I just like College of Whispers anything because I'm a big dork. You know? Stuff that we don't have in Biggie Smalls. That's going to be interesting. I'm going to eventually give Link Ableton a level in Bard. Because he's doing bardy things. That's sort of an interesting thing from a player perspective that you want to think about is when you level up and people are thinking about multi-classing and stuff like that, if they come to you asking for advice on what they want to pick, good thing to say there, just generically say, what do you want to do? Like, what kind of fun do you want to have? And what's something that you want your character to lean into? When you ask that question that way, a lot of people will say things like, well, I want to get better at this, or I want to get better at this. Instead of doing it that way, which is sort of min-maxy, think about what their character has already done and see if there are ways to explore that stuff. The reason that I want to give Link in the Biggie Smalls campaign, the reason I want to give him a level of Bard at some point, is because he's been doing Bard-like things with none of the Bard benefits. So he's been insulting his enemies in combat. He's been playing music at bars. He's been flirting with his party members. He's been using his charisma to intimidate and to persuade. He's been doing stuff that bards do. And so, what do? When it makes sense, I give him a level of Bard. because he may as well benefit from the stuff he's already doing. You know? That's a great way to approach your characters when you are playing and when you're dungeon mastering and your players come to you for advice on what they ought to do with their level up. Dwarf Ranger Rogue. Yeah. Give him the mobile feat. And, you know, dwarves are very dangerous over short distances. They're natural sprinters. So yeah, like think about what your character has been doing, what this character has been doing. I've actually maxed out on my number of shared like content enabling stuff, so gonna have to get it somewhere else. But yeah, so like that's a good way to think about your bad guys when you're sort of constructing your big bad evil guy, your BBEG. What have they been doing? And how do you give them stats that reflect that stuff? So we may as well get into some big bad design here in a second. I'm going to get some water, and I'll be right back. We're going to talk about some big bads. All right, welcome back, guys. Okay, so big bads. First, how are we doing? We've been doing this for an hour and 15. How we doing? Doing all right there in the chat tonight? I've forgotten how to drink water, so that's fun. Whew. Good. So, big bads. I tried putting water in mouth, but mouth did not cooperate. I think that one day I'm just gonna... Oh, and it... See, I missed that step. Then swallow the water. Yeah. So, big bad evil guys. What are they about? Why do we have them? Well, the why we have them is pretty easy, right? Like, we have them because what is the party going to do otherwise? There's plenty the party could do otherwise. What are you, crazy? There's all kinds of stuff that the party could do other than fight some big bad evil person who has something going on, some nefarious plot. There doesn't have to be, you know, the cackling power behind the throne. There doesn't have to be, you know, the invading army. There doesn't have to be the evil wizard, you know, all this stuff. Non-combat based big bad. That's cool. But how do you make that fun for your players? That's a really interesting question. We can talk about that more in other streams. We're going to be doing this a while, I hope. And I don't want to go over everything I know, which is very little, in no time, you know? So when we're talking about big bads, we're really talking about big bad problems. We're really talking about big bad issues. And sometimes, a lot of times, those are centered on people, right? Those are centered on individuals who are affecting this problem, whatever it is. Maybe it's an organization. Maybe it's someone on a power trip. Maybe whatever. No, Nadia, you cannot come up here. They're not going to understand a word you're saying. I mean, fine, come here. So my cat's going to come join us. Come here. So, here I am, talking about big bad evil guys, petting a cat, Dr. No style. Where was I? Organizations, movements, issues. Sometimes located on a person. A side question, yes. I'm just babbling, so what's the side question? Let's take it. Because we can talk about big bads and stuff like anytime. I don't really care. There's actually a poll that I want to try get going to see like what we talk about next, once we get a little bit more audience involvement. But yeah, what's your side question? Xanathar's Guide or Volo's Guide to Monsters to unlock the extra races. If you're looking for player character races, it's Volo's for a lot of stuff. Actually, let me look really quickly. I'm gonna check and see, just so, because I imagine that you're about to buy this. So I will look at Xanathar's Guide to Everything and see if there are any races in here. No. Xanathar's Guide gives you some new character options, some barbarian paths, bard colleges, a couple of cleric domains, druid circles, a couple of fighter archetypes, some monk paths, a couple of paladin oaths, a few different really cool ranger subclasses, 4 rogue subclasses, 3 sorcerer subclasses, 2 more patrons and some more eldritch invocations for the warlock, a new school for the wizard, the war magic school, and some racial feats, stuff like that. Yeah, Xanathar's guide is more like an expanded thing for the DM guide than it is a list of player races. Volos is a great book. It was one of the first supplements that I bought for 5th edition. Partially because it gave me some really great lore on monsters in the world. That's the big thing there. There are some extra spells in Xanathar. I don't typically, like, if it's a published spell in an official rulebook, I don't worry about whether or not somebody can use it. I just think, you know, more power to you. I bought the book. I made it available. You can use it. So, for anyone who's curious, Nadia is busy licking a hole in my arm. So there's that stuff. But big bads. Big bads are really issues and problems and threats that are attached to people and movements. Or not attached to people at all. Maybe it's a natural disaster that you've got to put some stop to before it happens, you know. Every 392 years on the 32nd day of the 8th month, you know, the moon comes too close to the planet and causes the tides to rise to gargantuan proportions, swallowing mountains, destroying cities, putting out volcanoes. Maybe that's your big bad. Current party are going to build their own BBEG. How is that happening? That's really interesting. Are you sort of just taking assumptions from them about what's going on and building that into a person or a situation? That's kind of a cool idea. But basically the problem is, like, you've got to figure out what the problem is, what the drivers for it are, like what are the supports that hold that thing up, and how do you go about knocking them down? That's cool. That's cool. I like that. Congratulations on the Volos. So yeah, when you look at that stuff, you have to figure out, like, what's your central problem for your campaign, and how does it coalesce into a single point? There are things they can do that will help and hinder. It's very Mass Effect 2-ish. I like that a lot. I like that a lot. That kind of structure is really fun. I don't do great with it because I'm lazy. One of the things that I'll do with the development of the BBEG is I'll have my issue figured out, right? Whatever the problem for the world is. You know, let's say that there's someone's trying to raise an army of zombies. That's a problem. Who's raising this army of zombies? Well, okay, it's the necromancer Ted. The Lord of the Ted Lord of the Dead. Ted Lord of the Dead has some plans. He's got to do some stuff. He's got to get stuff done in order to raise this army of zombies. Some who call me Tim. Fun fact about that scene, he had actually forgotten the name that they gave the guy, and so he was just like, some called me Tim, and they kept the take. So where was I? Oh, yes. Ted, Lord of the Dead, has some stuff to get done, and he's going to try to get that stuff done. Well, what do you need to raise a bunch of zombies? You need a bunch of dead people. Living people don't listen so well. So maybe Ted starts small, you know? Raising a small town's graveyard taking the thralls under his control and leading them back to his lair in a march through the forest. Whatever. And then he starts raising the dead in other places, and eventually he runs out of graveyards that he can discreetly raid for bodies. And now he's got to start making his own dead people. You know, if you don't have your own corpses at home, store-bought is fine. So Ted goes to the store. That's more or less where we get our big bad from. Now, how do we develop this person into something that's more than just like another dude to knock down? Easy. We give him goals, right? We need to raise so many dead people into zombies. Great. Well, that doesn't make an army. You also need weapons for them. Okay? You also need commanders for them. You also need a base from which to launch. You need a target to launch toward. You need a plan for how you're going to take that target, how you're going to continue to extend your war against the living with your army of the dead, Lord Ted, from that point. Where do you go from there? You know, you don't want to be like the dog who finally caught the car and didn't know what to do with it. So, make those goals, set them out. And then, here's where the magic happens. Every week, when you play your game with your party, every other week, whenever you play your game with your party, sit down and write a diary entry for Ted. Sit down and do it. Total economic disintegration, the Ted path to communism. Yeah. Sit down, write a diary entry for Ted. Write a diary entry for Ted's right-hand man. Write a diary entry for the commander of the armies, for the lieutenant, whatever. Whoever your big important NPCs are, or the bad guys, write a diary entry. It can be 5 sentences, 1 paragraph. Do the same thing for your big important good guys. Do the same thing for any faction in your world. Write these diary entries in character for those people. If you do that, the player's actions will have influence on your big bad, and you don't have to try. If you do that, your player's actions will have influence on the good guys, and you won't have to try. You'll know what they think of them, and you'll have a written record of it. This is something that I haven't done in a while, but that I need to get back into. Because it makes your world absolutely come alive. No question about it. Your world absolutely comes alive when your NPCs have journals, have diaries. This is something I came up with when I was really, really into factions and urban campaigns. How do you track 1,000 NPCs? You don't. You track their organizations. You track their allegiances, their major movements, what's known in the company, you know? There's not anything that you do to track those 1,000 NPCs. Instead, you track 10 NPCs and their opinions, their perceptions. You have a timeline for each organization. Okay? Ted needs to have 100 corpses raised by next week in game time. Whatever. Okay, well, he's got to do some stuff about that. The players will probably notice. Well, what if they thwart Ted's plan? Ted's going to write a really pissed off diary entry about how he's 100 troops down, and now he's got to come up with something else to do. It's going to alter his plan. It's going to give him a sidetrack. Maybe he can't get 100 corpses from there. What if he got just 5 really high quality ones from the ancestral tombs of the legendary knights? New task for the big bad. And then he'll get back on his merry way, because maybe those 5 will guard him while he raises another 100 of regular rank and file. And the party runs into those guys, they get knocked out. Ted's not interested in killing them. He has dead bodies to raise. He doesn't need to waste his time with low-level adventurers. And he makes sure they know that. And he writes in his journal, man, I really showed those jackoffs from town. And the players write in theirs, in their little conversations, I hate that Ted guy. We're going to show him. Where's he at? Now you've got a big bad. Because the players care about him. If the players don't give a crap about your big bad, they're not the big bad. They're the big annoyance. They're the big joke. Write journal entries for your important NPCs. Yeah, you got to get some of them high quality corpses. And so, you know, he gets detoured by the players. His plans get frustrated by the players. But eventually Ted does rise to power because Ted doesn't quit. Right? And so your big bad is tenacious and gaining power. Maybe he gains power through artifacts that he finds that you can just give him, but he writes about them in his diary. You know, maybe he, great, do it. Tell me what you do. I'd love to find out. You know, maybe he steals some magic items off the players when he knocks them out because they might not be worth anything, but those items sure are. Write it in your journal. Have him advance the plot every week, whether or not the players do anything with it. Whether or not the players interact with Ted, have his plans move forward. Because Ted doesn't quit. Right? And eventually you end up with a big bad that matters. And we can talk about how to build tension between choices to where different threats require their attention at the same time with a concept called A plot, B plot. But I think that I've given you enough information to jam into your brain tonight, and we'll talk about A plot, B plot another time. Please ask me about it. I would love to tell you what I know. But yeah. So like diary entries, journal entries paired with goal-oriented timelines are a great way to build a big bad. Because big bads have plans and they don't care about the players until they get involved and screw them up. You know, it's very much like Jesse and James from Pokemon. They typically weren't that worried about Ash and Misty and Brock. What they were worried about was getting the job done for their boss, Giovanni, or making sure they had food to eat. You know? And the party happened to get involved. That's the way we ought to think about this. The party happens to get in the way of the big bad's goals. Because the big bad is going to do stuff that's eventually going to attract attention. And the party, being the good sweet beans that they are going to try and stop the bad things from happening. Way the world runs, at least in Dungeons and Dragons. So that's big bads, at least a little bit about them. Any questions, any clarifications, anything you want to talk about in particular? I would love to talk about it. I'm going to be on here maybe another half hour. And then I'm going to get out of here. But yeah, so what do we want to talk about? Is there anything that that you want to talk about as far as like design, good tools for stuff, you know, where different ideas come from, how to look at things. I'm all about talking about it. Man. Ugh. Just built 5 characters. You are very welcome. These videos are not available on YouTube or on demand anywhere, but I should start downloading them. I should start recording this stuff. Yeah, I'm not terribly good at remembering things. Yeah, sleep deprived brain is a bad brain. Do not do that to yourself. Add them to the Biggie Smalls YouTube. We could. That's really up to everybody on the Biggie Smalls team. But yeah, I'm into it. I'll see if the last one is up on Twitch to be downloaded. But you know, let's look, you know? Why not? Why the heck not? See if this stuff is here. Really, you're just gonna lick any exposed surface? Is that what we're doing today? Ugh, good lord. I don't understand this cat sometimes, guys. I really super don't. She a strange baby. Yeah, so anyway, my apologies. Looking at all sorts of things. But I'll check and see if this is on the stream and see what I can do about maybe downloading them and uploading them to other places, because this is good conversation for me. This is hopefully helpful to y'all. Really, this is just like, how does Jordan run D&D, right? Like that's all this really is. Oh my. But yeah. Okay, the good. The last one is there, and I'm gonna go ahead and download that because it was about 2 weeks ago, and VODs tend to disappear before 2 weeks are up. And for your next game tomorrow, man, I'm so excited for you. I'm so glad that you're running a game. You know, that's really so good. I can't tell you how much I wish more people would run games, because it gives you an appreciation for what's going on, and also we've got vibe check in 2 days. Yeah, we do. It gives you an appreciation for what's going on, and it gives you a good idea of how to be a better player. I got so much better as a player faster because I understood what it was like on the other side of the screen. Good. New people in the hobby is always a good thing. Some things that I learned. It is extremely frustrating for the table and the dungeon master for you to not know what you want to do. What I mean by that is not, you know, you're annoying all your friends when you're taking 3 to 15 seconds to figure something out. What I mean with that is it is not as fun to play with someone who doesn't know what their character can do and what their character wants to do. This is not to tear down new players. Absolutely not to tear down new players. New players, you are learning so much stuff. So much stuff, and you are incredible for handling it. I want you to know that. You're incredible for handling all the ridiculous information load that's being thrown your way about this massive set of rules. And you're doing a great job just by being at the table and agreeing to play. Okay? What I'm talking about is people who should know what's going on. They've been there for a minute, and they've constantly got to hunt through everything. They're not organized at the table. They don't appear to really value everybody else's time. That's the thing. When you are a player, value everyone's time, especially your DMs. Shouldn't be at your turn before you start to think about what you want to do. That makes players know immediately, at least thought about it. So there's something really great that I do because I know how annoying that can be for other people at the table because I've been that player. Something that I do in our initiative order. You will have seen it in the Monday thing, which was a 5-hour session. Golly. Whenever it comes to someone's turn in the initiative order, I'll say, hey, you're up, you're on deck. Be thinking. You're up, this person's on deck. It's them and then the bad guys, and then you're up. Be thinking. Always remind your players to be thinking about the fact that they are on deck. Because then they've got an idea what they want to do, and they've probably had time to collect the dice to do it. Okay? That's one of the keys to faster combat, generally. But how do you do that outside of combat? That's a fun question. How do you do that outside of combat? Now, what I've been able to do in the past is definitely help people along, right? Like that's huge. They've got such an information load to deal with that you just don't, because we've internalized this stuff to a degree, right? We know the basic mechanics, we know how to apply them to most things, and then we just kind of learn little special things about what's going on. No big deal. You don't have to be an expert in the monster manual to run an orc. You know, you don't have to be an expert in the monster manual to know that hobgoblins typically command bugbears and goblins. It's basic stuff, but new people wouldn't know it. So how do we prep people outside of combat to do cool stuff? Well, you describe things. You ask them what they're doing, and then you let them be right. That's it. And be intentional about asking everybody what they're doing. What the players have to do is be intentional about including other players and other characters in what they're doing. This is one of my favorite things about Critical Role. About any experience table, but Critical Role does it really, really well. Especially in campaign. Well, campaign 1 and 2 both do it really, really well. But I've been listening to campaign 2 lately, so let's talk about that. Marisha Ray, Travis Willingham, decided at some point that their characters are friendly to each other. They figured out that Bo and Ford can be friends. And so, especially in social situations where Ford sort of acts as a little bit of a bumper again, as a guard against Bo's brashness and over directness. And so anytime Bo's interested in going somewhere, she goes, care to join me? Ford says, sure. Ford goes somewhere. Care to join me? Sure. All we have to do is invite our other players. All we have to do is invite our other players. And if people are having a hard time with that, a good question to ask them is, well, do you want to take anyone with you? Anybody going with it? Anybody going with them? Make it obvious that people are expected to interact with one another. A lot of people accidentally play Dungeons and Dragons like it's a video game. And it's not. It's not a single player experience like Fallout. It's not even really a quasi single player experience like Dragon Age or Mass Effect or whatever. It certainly isn't Skyrim or any of the other Elder Scrolls games. It's unique from those things in that other people are there who actually have agency and have other things going on than what you have going on. So we have to invite our other players. We have to, as dungeon masters, make it super clear to people that we expect them to play together without going, hey, invite them. Instead, we can say, are you taking anybody with you? Anybody want to go? Or, that's something that your character's interested in, right? Get them over there. And when they inevitably do the, no, I guess I'll let you handle it, say, no, you were already going over there. They're just going to tag along. Right? Work the table. Make sure that people are included. That's another big part of your job as a dungeon master. Include other people. It's not that hard. So, anything we want to talk about, because I was just sort of babbling about inclusion basically for the last 15 minutes. Talk about this stuff all night. I don't want to talk about NPCs too much because that's a whole big can of worms. There are so many different ways you can talk about NPCs and so many little pet theories that I have about NPCs. But you know, I'm glad that you're doing kind of the buddy cop thing, Spade. That's a really, really, really cool situation. I like that a lot. The only thing that's a little tough about that is like balancing combat, but it's not that hard if you make it interesting. I believe we talked about that last time, but I can't remember. Yeah. Well, you know, guys, I think that, let's see, favorite thing about my campaign is I'm DMing both veteran players and newbies. That's so good. Yeah, okay, like, can we talk about like staying or running for a second? Because wow, do we need to teach our players that running away is totally an option. I actually used that to an interesting effect. Yeah, like running away is a valid option. You don't have to kill the thing right there in front of you every time. You did try to run away. Now, the only time running away shouldn't be an option is when you are trying to freak your players out and scare them. So on Monday, with the House on the Hill one shot that we did, this was actually one of the funniest things that I did the whole time. It really amused me. I had not planned for the party to try to leave the house, but characters kept saying things like, we should leave, we should go away, we need to get out of here, we need to rest. And I thought, no, we're not going to rest, we're not going to run away. What door? We should not be here. Yeah, and that's when I thought, yeah, you're going to be here. Okay, yeah. Use milestone level up so they don't feel the need to fight if they don't think they can win. Yeah, people understanding that leveling up doesn't just come from combat is a big thing. And this is why we cover stuff in session 0. We talked about this last time, but in session 0, you get to say things like, we're going to level up using the milestone system, which means that there are ways that are not combat that you can gain what I consider to be relevant experience. We're not counting experience from stuff, but I will count experiences, things that you do, as being relevant to your leveling process. You don't have to fight in order to level. It's a good way to get experiences, but it's not the only way to gain power. Valid and important to say. Yeah, stay, fight, run. Right? It's sort of like the Final Fantasy formula. Fight, item, run. What do you want your characters to be able to do? Do they have the option to run? Normally, I would say, yeah, they probably have the option to run. The exception to that is generally like horror or the big bad. Yeah, generally in the final confrontation, if you run away, that's not really fun for anybody. And people tend to get that. I'm glad for that. I'm very thankful for that people tend to understand that. A centaur, so they can normally outrun if they need to. That's really cool. Something that the Vibe Check crew has not found out about my world is that centaurs are very unusual in my world, and I will not tell you more about that because one of my players is here. Centaurs are very frightening in the world of Tonadine. But yeah, centaurs are cool. It's a fun Spade, you know what? I will DM you about the spicy centaurs because they're hilarious to me. Oh no. That is correct. If y'all ever venture into the mountains, you'll find out about it. Or maybe not like the mountains, but the northern areas, kind of. Sorry, a friend just sent me a very disturbing picture, and I will not describe it to you because, yeah. But yeah, Spade, I'll send you something about it. They're really funny. Do not avoid the mountains. There are all kinds of good things in the mountains. There just also happen to be centaurs. So where was I before the centaurs? Gosh, where was I? Anyway, you'll have to go to the Underdark to get to the Driders. And I'm not telling you where the entrance is yet. Oh, run, fight, item. Okay, so yeah, people need to know that running is an option most of the time. And there's also a theory that I've had for a while about combat that works sometimes and sometimes doesn't. But it's a pretty cool idea, is that you want to design combat such that there is a way to get through it and finish it or avoid it without having to fight. The perfect little example of this, right? You're fighting giants in a valley. How do you stop the giants without having to fight them? Easy. You trigger a rock slide. If you're in the snowy mountains, well, okay. You cause an avalanche. And it stops them. Yeah, there's a save associated with that or something. Whatever. But there's a non-combat solution to this thing. Non-combat solutions are really, really interesting, and I think that more people ought to try them. But yeah. That's just sort of an axiom from me, you know? More people should try non-combat solutions when they design conflict. But, yeah, so we're in the last, 7 minutes of this. Like to set up traps as a player to avoid combat. That's cool. That's really cool. I had a player one time who kept a notebook of all traps that they came across. He was an artificer, and so we worked it out to where he could create any trap that he had studied for 10 minutes. And so, so he kept this notebook of traps. And he was constantly leaving them behind the party so that nothing could sneak up on them. That works really great until they try to run. And they've got to avoid all of his high DC traps. So, you know, traps can work for or against you. And it's really funny when they work against you. Oh, my. Anything else? I mean, we can talk about anything for the next about 5 minutes, because I've been talking for like 2 hours, and I'm very tired of talking, if I'm honest. No, not across the keyboard, please, no. Okay. Yeah, so we covered a lot of ground, guys. Do I believe? I believe in life after love. Do you believe in life after love? Yeah, I believe in life after love. I believe in it so strongly, I believe in life before love. I'm gonna use at least one of the characters that you use for the one shot. Mostly because I don't want to roll a character. It sounds like they will be. You've been putting some neat stuff there. But one of the things about playing higher tier one shots than what your party is sitting in like the main campaign is that you've got to learn a lot of stuff. He cry. You'll be playing pretty late, bud. Just telling you. Ooh. One shots are also a really great way if you're doing like a podcast or something. One shots are a really, really great way to get guests in and getting your friends involved in your game. Spade, you need to sleep, my friend. You need to sleep. Like we start at like 7 p.m. Eastern. I mean, nap through the heat of the day like a turtle. It is currently 9:56 p.m. Yeah. So yeah, we can talk more about that stuff off stream and all that. But you know, guys, it is close enough to 2 hours. I think that I'm gonna call it. It has been so much fun getting to hang out with all y'all and talk D&D, talk about story and stuff. I know I didn't do a great job of explaining all of my adventure nonsense, and we'll talk about more of it later, I guess. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But yeah, we'll see that. Aw, love you too, Spade. I'll catch you next time. Thanks for hanging out, guys. We'll see you next time.